Welcome back to a slice of news, where I cut you off a slice of news. Unsurprisingly, when the deadline for the Department of Justice to release the Epstein Files, they said, hey, we'll release the files. And what they released is page after page of entirely redacted documents where absolutely nothing is legible, which I suppose in hindsight is absolutely what we should have expected them to do when it came down to it. Because the last thing they wanted to do was release unredacted files because they know for an absolute fact that their boss, Donald Trump, is all over those files. So the only way to make it seem like maybe he isn't is to black out so much of the documents that it would be impossible to know who was named in all those documents. And they could say, what, Donald Trump? I don't see his name in these documents. Do you see his name in these documents? Clearly, he's not in them. What we're seeing is a government cover-up on a scale not seen since Nixon. In fact, even worse than Nixon, because at least during Watergate, the American people were not aware a cover-up was occurring. While this time, we have a whole section of the population who know full well that the government is covering up for their favorite Donald Trump, and they do not care. And they were willing to do anything to blind themselves to the fact that is happening right in front of them. There is no way anyone, Republican or Democrat, can see the joke, the absolute farce of a release by Pam Bondi at DOJ on these files and think that it's above board in any way. It is so very obvious that those documents are so heavily redacted because they know who would implicate, and they do not want the American people to see it. And of course, that's what compelling the release of these files was all about. It was about transparency, genuine transparency, so the American people could know what was in those files, who was in those files, and what or who wasn't in those files. But genuinely, not just blacking them out and saying, oh, they're not there because you don't see it. Congress decided the American people deserved to know, and the Department of Justice said, no, we think you don't. 119 pages of entirely black documents is not transparency. And you don't black out that much unless there's something that you are clearly trying to hide, which only makes them seem less trustworthy. The purpose of the Epstein Files Transparency Act was not for the Department of Justice to release what they felt was worth releasing in a form that they felt comfortable releasing. The point was to get the facts out there and to have transparency. I mean, that's what the word transparency in the Transparency Act meant. And of course, when confronted with this fact, the Department of Justice says, oh, wait, no. It's about protecting the victims. We have the victim's best interest in mind at all times. But the problem there is, I think their definition of who the victims here are may differ from what others and the general public might think. In their mind, the victims are people like Donald Trump, people who did crimes but do not want to suffer the consequences of their actions, while the only victims we, the people, would like to see protected are the ones that they victimized, who cannot get justice for what they endured if their victimizers are being protected by the very same government that is supposed to be protecting them. And what is even less surprising is that while they released a bunch of heavily redacted or entirely redacted documents, they didn't even put out all the documents they were legally required to by the December 19th deadline, claiming that it will take at least another 2 weeks to fully vet all the documents and protect the victims by redacting out their names. But if they had until the 19th, redact everything they wanted to redact and put it out, and they still need another 2 weeks, it really shows just how much they need to cut out to make it quote-unquote safe for public consumption, which of course means blacking out any incriminating evidence against Donald Trump or any of his fellow conservatives. Though on that topic, as we all know, Bill Clinton is probably, almost definitely, also named in those files. And those on the right say, well, those on the left, well, what about your precious Bill Clinton? What if he's in those files? To which and I think a lot of those on the left say, yeah, great. If he's in those files and he did bad things, he should be held accountable for them too. I don't care. I don't love Bill Clinton. I don't worship him. Sure, I was a big Bill Clinton fan. I admit that. but not to the point that if he did something wrong, I would not seek for justice against him. In a lot of ways, Bill Clinton has not been the man I thought he was in my younger years, and I can accept that. And if he is truly a bad man, I want him to be punished for it. There is absolutely not a single person that could be in those files that I would want the government to cover for. None. Zero. I don't care who they are, how high profile they are, which side of the political aisle they're from. I want them all to be punished because they deserve it, and the victims deserve actual justice for what they went through. And justice does not come from protecting the victimizers, whoever they may be. Though at the same time, his inclusion in these files does not mean that he is connected with the type of wrongdoing others who are also mentioned in those files are guilty of. To use a quote from Bill Clinton's Deputy Chief of Staff, quote, "They can release as many grainy 20-plus-year-old photos as they want, but this isn't about Bill Clinton. Never has been, never will be. There are two types of people here. The first group knew nothing and cut Epstein off before his crimes came to light, and the second group continued relationships with him after. We're in the first. No amount of stalling by people on the second group will change that." And yes, the truth is Bill Clinton is no saint. Never has been, never will be. No politician really is completely clean. Unfortunately, that's just part of the job, especially when you get to the level of presidency. It attracts imperfect men. Bill Clinton is not perfect, but Bill Clinton is also not a sex criminal like our current president. The attempts by those on the right and in the administration to pull focus away from Donald Trump and his cronies onto people like Bill Clinton is a poor deflection tactic because it doesn't really work. Unlike those on the right, if Bill Clinton and people on the left were truly guilty of the sort of things Donald Trump and those on the right are guilty of, we would want them to be brought to justice. We would not want the government to protect them and hide their identity so that they do not have to face repercussions. They even tried to throw the late Michael Jackson under the bus by releasing a photo with some redacted child images featuring him, Bill Clinton, and Diana Ross, when it turned out that image had absolutely nothing to do with any sort of crimes. The children in that photo were actually Diana Ross's children, and it came from a fundraiser that had absolutely nothing to do with any of the accusations about Epstein. Reportedly, Michael Jackson's only real connection to Jeffrey Epstein was at some point he was in the market for houses, and Jeffrey Epstein's home was one of the properties he was considering, and he did not even know who Jeffrey Epstein was at that time. If they are that desperate to deflect and distract to a point that they would basically falsify evidence, it really makes you wonder what they're truly covering up and who they're covering up for. Although obviously we know it's Donald Trump, but still, it truly boggles the mind how anyone could be okay with what we're seeing. They could not be more out in the open with this cover-up and how blatantly they're trying to project a false narrative of Donald Trump is not a criminal who did many crimes with his best friend Jeffrey Epstein, but they also tried to say, oh, look at those people on the left. Look at Bill Clinton, Michael Jackson. They were there too. Maybe that means that they did bad stuff too, when there doesn't seem to be any evidence to support that, while on the other hand, they are very clearly hiding all the evidence that supports that Donald Trump and his fellow Republicans were absolutely guilty of some of the worst and most abhorrent crimes, and they do not deserve to be protected from facing the consequences of those crimes. But when you really get down to it, it's not about whose name is under all those black marks, or who appears in all those old pictures. All those girls were victimized. That is a fact. That is a known fact that all of them can attest to. Somebody victimized them, and whoever it was deserves to be punished for it. And they will not be if all we ever get are a bunch of blacked out documents. For a department that's supposedly about seeking out justice, the Department of Justice is not trying very hard to get justice for these victims. Partially because I think they know exactly who victimized them, and it is not politically convenient for them because they know it is Donald Trump and Republicans. And as they are a Republican-led department, they do not want to tell on their boss and his friends. Even in 2 weeks when they supposedly are going to be ready to give out all the documents that they are supposed to have done so back on the 19th, this is not over, and it will not be over just like that. If what they were covering up for wasn't bad enough, the fact that they are covering it up at all is going to be something they're going to be held accountable for. Not by this administration, certainly, but the next one, the Democrat-led administration, the Democrat-led Congress, and hopefully Senate, is absolutely going to come after them because this is unacceptable. I have little doubt that when it comes down to it, people like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are going to claim the old, we were only following orders and trying to do what we thought was best for the American people. But that has never worked, and it will not work for them this time. Even if it were somehow believable that they were truly in their heart trying to do what they thought was best, it does not excuse their actions. It will not protect them. The repercussions of covering up for a literal criminal that is our president, the administration that has been coasting with no accountability for almost a whole year now, will be made to come to account. Not right now, but they will be. And no amount of tears or justifications will be enough to save them, nor should they be. It seems almost ironic they consider themselves to be the party of law and order when they are the ones who commit the most blatant crimes on a regular basis. If they were truly devoted to law and order, they would put themselves in prison, because this administration are the real criminals. When you got down to it, this whole Epstein file thing is not about nailing Donald Trump. Although it is a little bit about that, since of course it's all about showing that our president is an awful human being and a sex criminal and should be punished. It's really about getting justice for these victims. These girls have had to live the entirety of their lives practically waiting for their justice. And for the first time in a long time, it really felt like maybe the wheels were turning in the right direction and they might just start getting something. But all the administration has been doing is jerking them around and tempting them with a promise of justice and doing nothing for them. If by some miracle Donald Trump could somehow be truly shown to be blameless in all of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, which, let's be honest, he is not. But even if he were, the important thing here is that those victims get justice against those who did the victimizing against them, even if somehow they weren't Donald Trump, which they were. The point is, they deserve justice, and this is not even close. So Pam Bondi and DOJ, if you actually ever cared about these victims and getting them the justice they deserve, do better. This isn't it. And you know it, and we all know it. They deserve better than this. And I seriously doubt 2 weeks from now anything will have changed in any meaningful way. It is abundantly clear that justice for the victims is not their priority. Protecting Donald Trump is. Full stop. I would say they should feel ashamed, but the administration has shown time and time again that shame is not something they are capable of feeling. But what the Department of Justice released, and I put release in large quotations, isn't nearly enough, and it is not what they were legally required to do. That was not transparency, that was not accountability, and they need to do better, and do so immediately. The eyes of the American people are on them, and they need to do what is right, not only what serves their leader. Epstein's victims deserve better, the American people deserve better. And if the current Department of Justice is truly about justice, and they want accountability and the truth, prove it. Show us. Don't give us a bunch of blacked out documents and old photos and think that that's enough, because it is not. So I guess if they're saying they need 2 more weeks to put out everything, then in 2 weeks, let's see what they give us. Though I doubt very much it's going to be much better than what they've already given us, which is basically nothing of substance. And I suppose we'll see what happens from there. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.